This is a story, a true story, about an event on the first ship I had after I finished my apprenticeship in the Navy. The ship was a light aircraft carrier called HMS Triumph, a light fleet carrier. And my first trip was the West Indies. One day we decided that we'd have a weekend off the ship. We were in either the Windward or the Leeward Islands in the West Indies. And there was an island called Long Island. And we thought it'd be a nice idea if we took a boat and went on to Long Island and spent the weekend there. So we set off. A motor cutter towed us around in a whaler, along with all our cameras and our food and our rum ration and everything else that we needed, camp beds and things, to Long Island. We landed and we set up camp. It was almost deserted. There were a couple of boats came in where local West Indians decided they'd like to sell us more rum, and they had vast supplies of VAT 19 Trinidad rum. But apart from that, it was very, very quiet. They also helped us to build a sort of enclosure of palm fronds. So it was like a little house. When we came to leave, there was a problem. The boat was coming from the ship, the motorboat, to pick us up and tow us back. But the weather was extremely rough. It became apparent that if we tried to launch our whaler into this rough weather, it's quite likely she'd turn over. So we had a little meeting and decided that those that could swim, which were most of us anyway, would man the whaler, and those that were willing to do so, to see if we could get out with the vast proportion of the items we needed to take back with us. And then, all being well, we'd come back in again and pick up the rest of the crew. So away we went. The boat was launched. We rowed like mad and nearly standing on end at times. We eventually got out past the surf, by which time the actual boat was nearly full of water. And all the equipment, the cameras, everything were floating around in it. We started bailing out. Well, one member of our mess was the ship's barber, always known as Snips. Now, Snips was rather concerned that he was going to get left behind on this island. He was a civilian working for the Navy. And he decided he would try to get out to us without waiting for us to come back in. The only trouble was he wasn't a swimmer either. So he started walking out, and eventually the sea washed over him and we had a problem. Well, on board the whaler, we had Mike Rushton and Bill Goodchild, who jumped over the side and swam to rescue him, which they did. But in turn, they were washed up onto some rocks on the beach where there were lots of sea urchins. And although they were helped out by a chap called Jimmy Brundrett, Snips and the rest of them had lots of spines in them. Anyway, that was it. We carried on out, bailing out all the time, and went back on board, because it was decided the only answer for this was for the rest of the team to walk over this mountain, to the other side of the island, where there was a bay which we knew would be fairly calm. And they started their walk. One of the team was Blondie Boucher, electrical artificer, very blonde, who was wearing a banyan shirt. The sun was so strong that when he did eventually get back on board, the patterns were burnt into his skin. And he looked a bit like Robinson Crusoe, because he had all these bandages draped around him and all this calamine lotion on him, and etc.
Oh dear.
And that was Blondie. Anyway, Snips meanwhile had this terrible shock, and walking over the island and being a civilian anyway, for some unknown reason, he wanted to go to the toilet, and he realised that you know, there just aren't any toilets on tropical islands, and the shock caused him to mess himself. Anyway, the long story is, short of the long story, is that they got to the other side of the island. The motor cutter went around and picked them all up and brought them back on board. So it was quite an eventful weekend, very enjoyable up until that point. The only thing was after that, the Naffy barber, well, I'll leave it to you, he's normally called Snips.